All right, it's time to look at the Word of God for a little bit. And this is an exciting part of our week. Are you excited to open up the Bible? We're in the book of Acts right now, and we always start off with an illustration. And so before we even recap where we're at in this crazy story, let's have our illustration for today. Let's have our illustration for today. So I'm going to start off with a couple verses, and these are not the verses we're looking at. But these are verses that are often on my mind. Not all the time, but in times when I have a lot of regret about things that I've done in the past, or even things that I've done recently. I don't know if you ever feel like that. Listen to these verses from Proverbs 5. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. So this is a teacher, Solomon, actually teaching young people. Lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to the one who is cruel. Lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. So listen to my wisdom, or you're going to have a lot of consequences, a lot of bad stuff. And then at the end of your life, you will groan when your flesh and body are spent. You will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors. And I was soon in serious trouble. I don't know if you ever felt like that. I have felt like that a lot. There were things that, for whatever reason, I guess just because I'm a sinful human being, I seemed not to be able to learn from people who just told me the right thing. People told me as I was growing up, here's what you need to do. Don't do this, and everything's going to go way better. And I was like, no, I know. You don't know. I'm the one who knows. I'm going to do this thing that you just told me not to do. And doing those things sometimes, often because I was angry, actually. Often for me, I know it's different for different people, but often for me, it was out of anger that I did the thing that everybody who was wise was telling me not to do. And then I often felt, looking back, I often feel, how I hated discipline. How I hated to listen to anybody, even when they were telling me the right thing. And the only way I seemed able to learn it was by God doing this, putting me into serious trouble. So we have in the English language kind of an older expression. We don't use it too much nowadays. It used to be used a lot in the past. And I think that's because it was taken over by like a record label and then it sort of lost its power. But I'm not talking about the record. I'm talking about the original expression, the school of hard knocks. Okay? What does that mean? It means that life teaches you lessons by punching you in the head when you don't do the right thing. Correction, consequences, boundaries in this life. God has built this into the world so that we will learn, and often it is the only way we can learn. As you train your children, maybe some of you have animals, like a dog or something that you train, you will find it's not just words. Words alone cannot train someone to go the right way, not consistently. It has to be consequences. It has to be boundaries. That's true for all of us. And so God has kind of built that into the world in some ways. Some of the things for me, that I had to learn the hard way, just to get a little bit more specific. When I was, learned to drive, when you learn to drive, they teach you lots of things, right? All the rules of the road. And what do they teach you to do when you're learning to drive? What do they teach you to do with the speed limit? Yeah, they teach you to follow the speed limit. Now, sometimes if your instructor is like your parent or something, they might say, well, you can go like a couple over, like maybe 5 kilometers over, but not more than that, right? And a real trained instructor will never tell you that, right? You got to follow that speed limit. But, this is one example from my life, just to give you some specifics. Do you think I obeyed that? No, not at all. In fact, when I first learned to drive, I really loved to drive way too fast. And partly that was an expression of anger for me sometimes. There was a time when I just had so much anger in me that I would drive. I can talk about this too long maybe, but I would drive to school at probably 130 kilometers an hour, something like that. Not on the freeway, on regular roads. What do you think that resulted in? So there are some systems that have been put into place in our world that have consequences, right? Consequences for these things. I got a lot of speeding tickets. I got a speeding ticket once that was, this is back in the day, and it was over $200. Okay, this is a long time ago. It was over $200, and that was the police officer being lenient with me. He gave me a long lecture and told me, I could arrest you right now for what you just did. And I never told my parents about that speeding ticket, actually. Actually, maybe I did, but it was like 20 years later that I told them about that speeding ticket. I did not tell them at the time. But you have to learn, and it wasn't just once. I had to go through that process of consequences over and over again. That's a little bit funny now looking back. It's only funny because no one died, but it wouldn't have been funny if the consequences had been harsher. Another one for me, and I've already said this a few times, but the biggest struggle in my life, and again, it is different for different people, but the biggest struggle for me has been anger, right? And the pattern is anger, and then out of your anger, you do stupid things that you shouldn't do, even that you know you shouldn't do, that others have told you not to do, but you know are not the right thing to do. And then you experience great regret as a result because the consequences come in. But this is actually training. And it's training that's put into our lives. That system of consequences is not it's not there by accident. It is put into our lives by the Lord himself. And what we're going to see today is we're going to see a very clear example when we get to the Apostle Paul. Saul of Tarsus was his original name in Acts chapter 9. When we get there, we're going to see a very clear example of the discipline of the Lord. And actually, this is all over the book of Acts and how he brings those consequences in order to train us to become the right kind of people, the kind of people we were made to be. That school of hard knocks is not there by accident. We are in a series right now called Spirit, Body, Bold, and it is lessons from the book of Acts. The book of Acts is all about the Spirit of God. So this is after Jesus died and rose again from the dead. And so now he's no longer visible. He told his disciples over and over again, you're not going to be able to see me anymore physically, but I'm still going to be here. And his disciples kept saying, what are you talking about? I don't understand. But now in the book of Acts, we see them starting to understand. The Spirit of God is with them, leading them. That is Jesus still here doing things then and right now, the Spirit. So wait for the Spirit was a huge point we had in this series. This is one of the main lessons. This is not our project. Life doesn't belong to us. It's not our thing. It's his thing. And what we are supposed to do is follow his lead in this life. That's true in the church. It's true in our individual lives. Second term, body. So he is the one doing the work. It's his project. He is the head, and we are the body. Jesus is still here leading by his Spirit doing things. We as his body, if you have become a follower of Jesus, you are supposed to follow his lead. Imagine what happens in your own life if your body does not do what your head is telling it to do. You are in big trouble. You are out of control. And so we need to make sure as the body of Christ, we're not like that, right? In fact, anger is a really good illustration for not this, okay? When you are angry and you lose control, you could think of that as your body taking over. When you are angry, and maybe some of you, especially guys, and maybe you've punched a wall before, right? Is that a smart thing to do? Was your head in control at that moment? Obviously not, because what did that do to your hand, right? Maybe you broke it, maybe you just hurt it. You also broke the wall, perhaps. You put a hole in your own wall. It's foolish, but your body took control in that moment, not your head. So we need to make sure that's not the case as we interact with the Lord. He is the head. And then bold, we've talked about this. This is the lesson over and over again from the book of Acts. We are supposed to respond to the Spirit with boldness. He will often lead us to do things that are hard or that will cost us something or that don't make sense to us at first. And what he's asking us to do, what faith looks like, is we do the thing boldly because he's leading us to do it. Once we're sure, I mean, there's a lot to be said about what is God leading me to do. But once we know what he's asking, what is he asking me to do next, I do that boldly, even if it doesn't make sense, even if I don't see how it's going to turn out. Spirit, body, bold. Boldness is the proper response to the Holy Spirit. All right, so where are we at in this book? We have, the message today is entitled Jesus in the School of Hard Knocks. Yes, sometimes Jesus, by his Spirit, through consequences in life, smacks you in the head and makes you go a different direction than you were going. It's just the reality. All right, where we were at in the book is this. Lots of amazing stuff had happened in the early church in Jerusalem, but they were all still in Jerusalem. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago now, we talked about the 7 waiters. Stephen was the first one. 7 deacons. These guys were appointed to run a bread feeding ministry. But immediately after that, we see God using them in powerful ways. The Spirit takes hold of some of these guys and does amazing things through them. Stephen, we saw in particular last week, we saw him preaching boldly. We've been looking at him for a couple of weeks. We saw him preaching in Jerusalem, preaching to the elders of the nation, and then we saw him die. We saw him die as the first martyr, the first witness to the truth of the gospel who died for that witness. And we saw he was actually fully surrendered to the Spirit of God in that moment. And so for him, he had maybe already been through the school of hard knocks in many ways, and now he has surrendered his life fully to the Spirit of God to such a degree that even death is nothing to him. That was an amazing thing. If you read back through that in Acts chapter 7, when Stephen dies, it's a beautiful thing. In fact, those who watched it couldn't even bring themselves to call it death. They said Stephen just fell asleep because he dies saying that he can see Jesus seated at the right hand of God the Father. He dies forgiving the people who are killing him, just like Jesus died. He dies having the best day of his mortal life and entering a new life very clearly. And then his death becomes a kind of seed for the church. So we talked about this idea last week that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. What happens is, actually, the church was not fully listening to God in those days. We had this painting. I've been really into 16th century Spanish paintings. I don't know why, but I have been. This is another one. The martyrdom of Stephen. What do I have after that? Yep. So what happens right after his death is that a general persecution breaks out. When he died, there's one guy, you can see actually in the back of this painting, there's someone who's guarding the clothing, who's guarding the cloaks, because everybody takes off their robe so they can go kill Stephen because they believe he's blasphemed against God because he's saying Jesus is the Messiah. Who is that in the back? There's a very famous verse in Acts chapter 7 at the end that says, "And then the witnesses laid their cloaks at the feet of a young man named Saul." The feet of a young man named Saul. And this is where Saul of Tarsus, the man who will rename himself as Paul the apostle, who wrote about a third of the New Testament, this is where he first comes into the story. The man who is writing this book, the book of Acts, is Luke, who is Paul's student, essentially. They were very close friends. So the rest of the book, in some ways, will be about, it's still about Jesus, but it will be about what Jesus does through Paul, through Saul of Tarsus. The fact that he was guarding the cloaks in that moment doesn't mean he was, just like a butler or something, or he was staff at the coat room. It means he was leading the execution of Stephen. It means that he directed it. He is a young man who's being trained by some of the most famous teachers in Israel at the time, and we're going to learn a lot about him going forward. But then he kind of disappears from the story for a moment. So after Stephen is stoned, there's this general persecution that breaks out in Jerusalem. Now remember, we said the church has stayed in Jerusalem. Now it's been, since Jesus died and rose from the dead, it's been about 10 years. And Jesus had told them what to do. He told them, you're going to be my witnesses. You're going to go tell people about me in Jerusalem, and then in Judea, and then in Samaria. These are regions in the area near Jerusalem. And then you're going to be my witnesses to the ends of the earth. And so far it's been 10 years, and they haven't gone anywhere, not even to the city closest to them, right? So you're going to be my witnesses in Surrey and also in Langley and also, all the way over into Alberta and to the ends of the earth, okay? And so far they're just in Surrey. Okay, they haven't left anywhere. And so notice what's happening here. God allows a persecution to break out. That means all kinds of bad stuff is happening. People are being beaten up. People are being maybe arrested. We don't know all the details of this persecution. Stephen dies. People are having their property seized. All kinds of bad stuff. Like, if that happened to you, if any of that stuff happened to you, just try to place yourself there for a moment. There's mobs of people wandering Surrey and North Delta, like looking for Christians to beat them up. What would that be like? Horrible, horrible thing in your life. God is allowing that in order to get them to do what he's already asked them to do. What does that tell you about your own life right now? If that's how God acts, if that's what he does, that sort of thing, they haven't listened for 10 years, and now he's going to allow this huge, horrible thing to come in to get them to leave the city and go where he already told them to go. If that's the kind of God he is, it's more important that he trains you and you get to be what he made you to be. That's more important than you just having a nice life or even a normal life. Then what is he doing? What does that mean for what he's been doing in your life all these years? So we talked about how this is the seed of the church. Usually in our English translations it says the church was scattered, but this is actually the word for sowing seed. The church is seeded all over the region. And the next thing we see is a revival in the city of Samaria, or the region of Samaria. This is where Jesus had told them to go. And we see Philip, who had been sent there. And we'll read a little bit of the story now, because this is where we left off with Philip a little bit last week. So those who had been scattered, or in the Greek text, seeded, sent out as seed by the Lord. Those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. So even though they're on the run, they're probably terrified, they're probably traumatized, none of them, or many of them, do not use that as an excuse to just hide for the rest of their lives. They start talking to people about Jesus wherever they go. Philip, so this is one of the 7 waiters. So you're still in this story of the 7 waiters, really. He's the second one mentioned. Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. So he probably starts off just telling people he knows about Jesus. There are marketplaces in the ancient world. There are public meetings, like synagogue meetings, and then there are meetings after that outside. He's probably speaking in some of these. And he tells people that Jesus is the Messiah in Samaria. And when the crowds heard Philip and saw the signs that he performed, so we don't know exactly what miracles Philip was performing, but when Philip would pray for people, things would happen. And so people saw this in Samaria, and probably people are healed, probably people who were demon-possessed, looked like, all kinds of mental problems, all kinds of problems. These things are just removed as Philip prays for them. And he's got other people. It's probably not just Philip, other people with him. They all pay close attention to what he says. And with shrieks, impure spirits come out of many, and many who are paralyzed or lame were healed. And so there's sort of a general revival in Samaria. Many, many people turn to Jesus. They start saying that they believe in Jesus, they believe he's the Messiah, they confess that, they give their lives to Christ, they become Christians. These people are not called Christians yet, but that's what we would say. They become Christians, and then they're baptized. So Philip is baptizing lots of people. Now, there's a whole section here that I'm going to skip because we need to stick with the main point. These few chapters, from chapter 6, 7, 8, 9, they're all actually one continuous story in the book of Acts. And Saul of Tarsus comes in at the beginning, and he comes in at the end, as we'll see. So I'm going to skip a whole section, but you should read it. The section that I'm skipping is Simon the sorcerer. And Peter and James come down to Samaria, and these are the apostles now, guys who had been with Jesus. They try to help out with this huge revival that's going on. Hundreds or maybe thousands of people coming to Christ. And they end up having this sort of battle, maybe not a battle, conversation with this guy who is a sorcerer. He's like a magician, and he's trying to get them to give him the same powers that they have. A big point of that section is that all of this that they're doing, even though they're doing amazing things, amazing miracles, it's not magic. It's not magic. It's not a trick. It is God himself at work. And in some sense, those who are doing it are not in control over it. It's the Spirit of God who's in control. It's not some human ability or trick or spell that's being cast. Okay, but we're going to skip past that part. And so the next thing that happens, which we alluded to at the end last week, is that God tells Philip to do something else that doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so imagine some sort of revival had broken out here. Okay, just like it's happening with Philip. Hundreds or thousands of people are becoming Christians. I wish that would happen in the city of Surrey and North Delta. We'll keep praying for that. God does what he wants at different times, so we keep trusting him no matter what. But imagine that had just happened, and this whole, church, this whole gym were just packed out with brand new Christians. That would be so exciting. What else would it be? Scary? A lot of work? It would be a lot of work, right? Think about if we actually got, hundreds of people to come to Christ. Every single one of you would have to be meeting with people every week to help them understand what it means to follow Christ. There's just no other way. Every single one of you and everyone who's even not here today would have to be ready to do that, because the pastor couldn't do it all. There's no way. There would be so much work to do in that situation. And here's what the Spirit tells Philip. He tells him, I want you to leave town. You just had hundreds of thousands of people come to Christ. Now leave. Just ditch them all. And what do I want you to do? Wander out into the desert where there's nobody. And what we're going to see is that Philip does this instantly. What he's going to do is he's going to meet this high official. Okay, let's go through the story. Okay. So an angel of the Lord speaks to him. We don't know how that happens. Maybe he sees an angel actually visibly, or maybe this is a dream. That's my guess. It's probably a dream. An angel of the Lord speaks to Philip and says, go south to the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. Isn't it interesting how, stuff that was central to history back then is still central to history, like right now? That's probably just a coincidence, right? So strange. Okay, so he tells him, leave this huge revival and just go down to the desert road. I got to tell you, I would probably argue with the Lord if he told me this in this situation. I would probably say, are you kidding me? I've been working for 10 years to see people come to Christ here in Surrey and North Delta, and now hundreds of people are coming to Christ, and you want me to leave? That's what you're telling me to do? Leave right now and go where there's no one out in the middle of nowhere? But Philip, his life is surrendered to the Spirit. It really is. And he immediately obeys this instruction. He doesn't even argue, not for a second. There's no record of Philip saying, really? You sure you want me to leave? No, he just goes. So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of the treasury of the Kandake. This is actually the word Candace. It's where the name Candace comes from in English. It means queen. Queen of the Ethiopians is the translation. And this man had gone to Jerusalem to worship. So Philip is told, go out into the desert, but he's not told that he's going to meet some amazing person there, but he goes in obedience. So he boldly follows the Spirit. So over and over again, Acts is showing us what it looks like to boldly follow the Spirit of God. Whatever he tells us to do, even if we don't understand, we just do it. We trust that he's going to do something powerful with it. And who Philip meets in this moment is this Ethiopian eunuch. This is a high official. I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about why is he a eunuch, all this kind of stuff. I'll just say it was really obvious that he's a eunuch. In the ancient world, you could identify a eunuch immediately. There's no question. A eunuch was also always a high official, almost always. They were. If you know what a eunuch is, they were made eunuchs so that they could serve in the palace, and that everybody knew there was no issue with like impropriety with the women in the palace. And so that means, think of like a government official today. So this is like an MP. This is like somebody with a lot of power. He's from Ethiopia, but really you should think of this probably more like southern Egypt. Southern Egypt, what was the ancient kingdom of Nubia. And this is who he meets, and he's got an entourage. He's probably got soldiers with him. He's got a lot of money. And there he is in the middle of the desert, just on this road by himself. And so he's on his way home. He's sitting in his chariot, and he's reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. And this is an amazing moment. The Spirit tells Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. This is all he tells him. Notice the Spirit does not tell him to go speak to this guy, but that's what he does next. So it's a kind of an interplay between Philip obeying the Spirit and also Philip just deciding what to do next. Both of those things are present. Philip runs up to the chariot. Philip is so obedient. He's ready to just run. He's ready to sprint up to this chariot at the command of the Spirit of God. And he heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you're reading? Philip asked. And the eunuch says, how can I understand it unless someone explains it to me? So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. And he's reading a particular passage of Scripture. What he's actually reading is Isaiah 53. And Isaiah 53, if you don't know, is the clearest prediction in the entire Old Testament of the death and resurrection of the Messiah. By far, it's the clearest prediction. This is what he just happens to be reading as Philip walks up or runs up to the chariot. So Philip explains the whole thing to him, and this eunuch then becomes a Christian, right on the spot. This is the rest of the verse. This is the prediction, the Messiah would be humiliated, deprived of justice. He would be killed. His life is taken, but he will rise from the dead. The eunuch asked Philip, tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else? Philip began from that very passage of Scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. So if you're a Christian and you've been a Christian for a long time, here's just a question, right? If somebody came up to you and was reading Isaiah 53 and they asked you, what does it mean? Would you be able to tell them? You should be able to tell them. It's really not that difficult. Philip didn't have a theology degree. He just told them, look, this is a prediction that Jesus would die on the cross and that would be for a purpose, that we would be healed of our sin through that, and that then he would rise from the dead. And just like he rose from the dead, we're going to be able to enter a new life with him. It's going to change the world. And Jesus is the one who was predicted in Isaiah 53. So that's what he tells him. The eunuch immediately wants to be baptized. He says, look, here's water. What can stand in the way of me being baptized? They happen to come along some water. Why is that remarkable? Where are they? In the desert. So you can see the timing of all of this. There's probably one oasis of water anywhere in, 20 or 30 miles, perhaps, 50 kilometers. And they run into it just at the right moment. And he wants to be baptized. Some astonishing things happen right after this. Philip kind of disappears, and he's taken somewhere else. I don't know if I have those verses after. Oh, yeah, I do. Okay. He gives orders to the chariot to stop. Philip and the eunuch go down into the water. Philip baptizes him. And when they come up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly takes Philip away, and the eunuch doesn't see him anymore, but just goes on his way back to Egypt, which is a long way from where they're at, rejoicing. And so what will happen eventually here is that this eunuch actually will start a church that became huge, that eventually within, let's say, probably 200 or 300 years, will become the primary religion of the entire nation of Egypt. This eunuch is the guy that starts what is today known as the Coptic church. And Coptic is the modern descendant of the ancient Egyptian language. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. If you were here for our series on Exodus and what happened with Moses and the Egyptians, this is now 1,200 years later, and God is now fulfilling a promise that he began through Moses a millennium before, to bring the entire nation of Egypt to himself, back to God through Jesus. Amazing. So we can take lessons from Philip. We can take lessons on this how to be bold and obey the Spirit. We can take lessons from just knowing that God is in control over all of history. He does fulfill his promises. Do you think people who are waiting those 1,200 years for God to fulfill his promise to the nation of Egypt, do you think that seemed like a long time to wait? Yeah, it did. Did God fulfill his promise? Absolutely he did. Just like he'll fulfill all of his promises. Amazing. One other lesson I want us to take away from this. Philip follows the Lord boldly in this moment, and that is our job. Our job is to follow boldly. But this is a very important point. It's not your job to do everything. And that's what we're going to see sometimes in the history of the church, in our own individual lives. We think it's our job to do everything, right? God's given me this calling. We've actually seen that over and over again in many different times in the Bible. But Philip could easily have thought, I started this revival in Samaria, so it's my job to stay here and see the whole thing through and do it all. But it wasn't. He was supposed to leave, and other people were supposed to take up that work as God's Spirit led. His job with the Ethiopian eunuch even, he could have easily thought, why did God just suddenly take Philip away? I think it's so that he didn't go to Ethiopia. He didn't go to Egypt with the eunuch, because that wasn't what God was asking him to do. His job was just to explain Isaiah 53 to that eunuch and to baptize him. That's it. And then his next job was to get out of there. And God was going to use that Ethiopian, not Philip. He was going to use the Ethiopian official to start a whole new work in a new place. And so remember, this is important for remembering this, redeeming the world, bringing people back to Christ. This is God's project. It's his task. It's not us. And one of the things that means is that we do our part, and that's it. So we should always be looking to what is God calling me to do and boldly doing it, but then not trying to take over what God is maybe leading other people to do, not me. Man, I have a huge problem with this. You guys can, if you see me doing it, let me know. I might take over your job and not let God do it through you. All right, so now we're up to the road to Damascus, and this is where we're going to bring back some of this anger stuff and some of Saul of Tarsus. He's going to come back into the picture here. And remember, this is all one story in this book. It's all one story. It's different pieces, but they're together on purpose. I like famous paintings. This one is not from 16th century Spain, and I don't really like it that much. But I thought I would show it to you because it's super famous. This is a Rembrandt, and it's in the Vatican, and it is a depiction of Saul on the road to Damascus. And this is a very famous moment. Maybe not everybody knows the story, but most of us would know the story. We're about to read it, so if you don't know it, that's okay. You can see here there's like all these angels. It looks a little bit like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, right? It's a similar kind of vibe. And it's from the same era, different painter, of course, but from the same era. You got all these angels up there. None of that's in the biblical story, although certainly angels were watching, I'm sure, if they watch what's going on earth. You have this beam of light coming down. Here's Saul of Tarsus on the ground. Here's all his companions running for their lives. There's one thing I really don't understand about this. Oh, sorry, this is not a Rembrandt. This is a Michelangelo. I'm totally wrong. This is not a Rembrandt. It's the same guy as the Sistine Chapel. Okay, so let me zoom in. Let me zoom in again. And you get to participate a little bit. What is wrong with this picture? What is it? Yeah, exactly. Very good. Give Katrina a round of applause. This is bizarre, okay? Because remember what we said, very famous verse, when Stephen is stoned, right? Those who are stoning Stephen lay their cloaks at the feet of a young man named Saul. A young man named Saul. We know for sure that Saul is he's in his late 20s or early 30s. around the age of 30, for sure. We know that from the Bible. We know that from sources outside the Bible. And here's the weird thing. Michelangelo knew that. He knew it. And he still made Saul of Tarsus an old man. If you try to look up why, he never said. Michelangelo never says why he makes Saul old in this picture. So I'll leave it to you. You can come up with your own theory. We can talk about him after church. Why did Michelangelo paint Saul of Tarsus as an old man in this moment when Michelangelo for sure knew that he was only 30 years old at this point? I don't know. But this is the story. Okay, so let's go through the story as it is, as we have the real story in the Bible. So it starts off like this. And so notice Luke, who's writing this, is connecting it back to all these other stories. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked for letters to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, that means Christianity. They don't have a term for what they are yet. They're not called Christians yet. Anyone who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. So a couple things here right off the bat. Why does he have to go to other cities to find these Christians now? Because there was a huge persecution. He persecuted them in Jerusalem and they all fled. That's why. So now they're living in other cities around the region. Okay? And so he's going to hunt them down. The other thing I want to show you, as we go further and further into Saul's life here, learning more about him in this book, we're going to try to get into who he is and his mindset here. He is not just chasing these people down or doing his duty because he's been ordered to go arrest these Christians. He is going way above and beyond. Look at the way that Luke describes this. Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. What kinds of emotions are driving Saul of Tarsus? I think he's really, really angry at this point in his life. I don't know why. I don't fully know why he's super angry. We don't know all the details of his life growing up. We do know that he grew up in a rich family. We do know that he was sent away, probably. We do know that he was studying under these really well-known teachers in Jerusalem. Actually, the most famous teacher of the entire era was his teacher, was his rabbi. We know that he seems like he has something to prove, like he is constantly trying to prove himself. That will be true even after he becomes a Christian. Not forever, but for a while. He seems like he still has something to prove. When I look at him in this era, I see things in myself and in many others I've known. This kind of deep anger. Something happened. Something, whether it was some bad thing that happened to him in particular, or whether he was just angry at life and how he'd been treated, or something that he didn't have that he thought he should have. Saul is an angry person. And so he is going after these Christians with a vengeance. We'll read a little bit more. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground, and he heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" He hears a voice out of the clear blue sky. He responds in a very sincere way to this voice, actually. You're going to see Saul is someone who, he does turn. He's not stiff-necked in that sense. We talked about a couple weeks ago how many of the leaders of the nation are stiff-necked. When God tries to get them to go a different way, they don't want to turn. Saul is not that way. He responds by saying, "Who are you?" Like, I'm hearing a voice out of the sky right now. Who is speaking to me? And the voice says, "I am Jesus, who you are persecuting." Now notice, who is he persecuting? Is Jesus around physically? And Saul's like chasing Jesus around? No, who's he persecuting? Christians. Jesus himself says, "You are persecuting me." That's powerful. That's important. We are his body. Jesus is still the one doing all of this stuff. Through us, yes, but it's him. Jesus tells him a number of things very directly. Get up and go to the city. You're going to be told what you must do. So this light actually blinds him. He's not able to see for a while. Get up, go to the city. You'll be told what you must do. I'm going to show you a different rendition of this same story. So later on in the book of Acts, Paul, the same guy who's Saul, he later on gives the same story. He tells it again in his own words. And so this is in chapter 26, which we're not going to get to in this series. We've looked at this before. But in this section, he actually gives us a little bit more information. And this is where we're going to draw our main lesson for today. Our main lesson for today is from this extra information that he gives. So when he's an old man, interesting, Michelangelo depicted him as an old man. When he's an old man, this is how he remembers it. He says, we all fell to the ground. We saw this light, and I was blind. I couldn't see anymore. Everybody saw the light. Everybody's running from this, diving onto the ground. I mean, you got to imagine what would cause a group of men who are, these are police, essentially. These are policemen. What would cause a whole group of police officers to fall to the ground in fear? We're talking about a light that's more like a hand grenade, right? This is something dramatic in this moment. And he hears a voice saying to him, and here he tells us specifically, the voice is in Aramaic or in Hebrew. That's his native language. Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? That's what we heard earlier in Acts chapter 6. But here we see more. He says, it is hard for you to kick against the goads. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. Now, what is the image here? We don't use the word goads very often in English. Anybody use that word this last week? We might, some of the young people use the word goaded, maybe. I don't know. That's weird. So what in the world does it mean? Probably the easiest way to think of it for us is as spurs on cowboy boots. So a goad is something that you use to get an animal to move or to go faster. So you can think of a cowboy like spurring the horse to make it move faster. Now, they probably didn't use spurs back then, so for them it was maybe more like an English riding crop, right? A little, it doesn't really hurt the animal, but a little whip that you use to get the animal to get moving, right? That's what a goad is. So what does it mean to kick against the goads? So it means you're trying to get the animal to go somewhere, and instead of going, the animal is trying to kick you. The animal is resisting this impetus, this whatever you're doing, this pain that you're trying to give it to get it to go in the right direction. Instead of going in the right direction, the animal is trying to attack you. What it means is that God has already been disciplining Saul. It means he's already been trying to get him to go the right way, and Saul is fighting him. Now, this is powerful because we don't know exactly what God has done so far in Saul's life, but if Saul is already kicking against the goads before this moment at the road to Damascus, God has already been trying to get him to go the right way, and that's what we know of God. But God is so kind and patient with us. He tells us again and again, sometimes for years and years, this is what I want you to do. This is the way I want you to go. Stop going that way, go this way. And we fight against him over and over. Some of us are stiff-necked. We just won't turn. We just refuse, and we keep ourselves focused in the wrong direction when he's trying to turn us. Some of us are angry and fight against God. And that is what Saul is doing. This is an explanation from the perspective of God of what Saul is doing when he's going to arrest all these Christians. He is he's fighting against God. God is trying to get him to turn, trying to get him to go the right way, and he is fighting against the Lord himself. He maybe doesn't even know it. Have you ever been fighting against God for maybe a long time, and suddenly you came to realize what you had been doing? Maybe you hadn't consciously realized what you were doing. And so here's a big lesson for today. It might be scary to boldly follow the Spirit. So these things God asks us to do, they often have a lot of risk associated with them. They often feel like the very thing I don't want to do the most is what you're asking me to do. Sometimes they involve us changing our whole lives, especially when we first come to Christ. For Saul, this is going to mean changing his entire direction, right? He's gone 100% into, we're going to persecute the Christians, we're going to attack people. I believe Jesus is a lie. Anyone who follows him is a liar. He's going to have to do a 180. And that's going to cost him every relationship that he has. So it's scary to make that turn. But it's hard to kick against the goads. This is the lesson the Lord is trying to teach him. It is no matter what, okay? I'll just paraphrase this a ton for you here. God speaking to Saul, I've got a plan for your life, Saul, and I'm trying to get you to follow that plan. And you keep on fighting me, but you're going to follow that plan no matter what. You're going to follow it. I'm going to make you follow that plan because it's the best thing for you and I love you. And it's going to be way easier if you would stop fighting me. Go the way I'm asking. Just trust me. Just go. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it's hard. I know it's scary. Just do it. I've asked you 100 times, and now I've blinded you, and you're on the ground in the middle of the road. You feel like you're about to die. It's going to get even worse if you keep on fighting me. Just do what I'm asking you to do, Saul. It's going to be so much better. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but they didn't see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind and did not eat or drink anything. You ever not had anything to drink for 3 days? In Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called to him in a vision, Ananias. Yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He described Saul to this. Ananias is a Christian. What does Saul come to the city to do? Arrest Christians and kill them. The Spirit describes Saul to this guy as if he hasn't heard of him. He's 100% heard of him. In the vision, he's seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. Lord, Ananias answered, I've heard many reports. You don't have to tell me who Saul of Tarsus is. Are you kidding me? I'm literally hiding from him right now in my house. I've heard many reports about this man and all the harm he's done to your people in Jerusalem. And he's come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest anybody who calls on your name, including me. But the Lord said to Ananias, go. For this man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. See, here's God saying it again. We'll focus on Ananias a bit more next week. We'll wrap this up. But here's the Lord saying it again. I have a plan for Saul. I have a plan for his life. It's going to be absolutely amazing. But here's the thing. I'm going to have to show him how much he must suffer for my name. That Saul, he's a fighter. He's a fighter. And it's going to take him a long time, a lot of hard knocks before he's going to really go the right way. That's the question for you and me today. How long are we going to fight the Lord? Are we going to be the kind of people like Ananias who maybe argue for a minute but then say, okay, I'm going to do what you're asking me to do? Or are we going to fight him and kick against the goads? He's still going to lead us where he wants us to go because he's good.